Basketball, football, baseball. From Division I to Division III, it's time for College Sports Weekly with Don Macholis and Dan Underberg on the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network.
We all my. Oh, yeah.
All right, welcome in.
Come on.
It's College Sports Weekly. We're live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios, powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook. Don't forget, you can hit us up on the Nicolay Law Talk and Text line, 414-677-1250. You can follow us on all our socials at WI Sports Radio, which translated to English means Wisconsin Sports Radio. Good gosh. Welcome to Saturday morning after happy hour with the Money Train. Welcome in, everyone. Good to have you on board again for College Sports Weekly. Don Wachilis, along with the Professor Dan Underberg, Charlie Usen on the ones and twos for the next 2 hours, as we'll get into some draft talk. Also want to talk about the portal, which is now closed. Do a little comparison, Professor, to look at least on paper as of today, how each of our Division I teams, meaning the Badgers and Marquette, are faring. Did we get better? Did we maintain? Did we fall back? We'll get into that in hour number 2. We'll look at the top 25 as far as Division III baseball goes, as Whitewater continues to have a tremendous season, and would love to have coaches on during this time slot. But with all the rain, with the way scheduling has gone, many of these college teams, I'm headed out to watch some college women's softball later this afternoon. Everybody's now trying to cram these games in after, we've had NOAA building arcs here in southeastern and central Wisconsin, trying to get everything in, Dan, before we get to the conference tournaments, which then lead, obviously, just like basketball, to the NCAA tournament.
Well, before you get to the conference tournaments, how about before you get to graduation?
Yeah, true.
Trying to get all that done. And I just, years ago when we were at Stritch and we remembered how difficult it was for the baseball team there to find spots, especially when I think they played all the way, remind me, was it WCTC where they played?
Yeah.
And when that field was flooded, they were stuck.
Right.
There was just nowhere to go. And so many games had to be put off or maybe even just canceled. It was just a mess. So if you are a spring sport person in college, and if you're a coach, and that I'll throw track in there and tennis in there and all those different things, boy, Godspeed to you. Just finding ways to get through the season has got to be really tough.
And the hardest part, I think, that sometimes we forget about is, you'll say to yourself, well, why don't we just play this thing now on Monday? Well, you also got to have umpires and officials and all of the ancillary stuff that comes into play to make the event happen has to be scheduled, because we've talked about this before, Dan. You've got a lot of, let's say, umpires at the Division III level. Part of their weekly routine is umpiring high school baseball as well. And so now high school baseball is scrambling to make sure everything is rescheduled. So it becomes quite the quagmire in trying to get these things up and running.
Yeah, what a good choice of words.
Thank you very much.
Well done.
In the midst of rain.
Reading his thesaurus.
Listen, I bounced back after WI Sports. So we're headed for a great show. Now, part of our show this week, and thanks to those who texted in, we want to play some movie clips. Going into break, coming out of break, we chose what we could put on the air and keep us viable for the weeks to come. Not that the FCC would be knocking at our door, because there were a few, and Dan, you and I were talking about this before we got on the air, that would fit what we were trying to do perfectly, but it would also mean our final time on the radio in the fair state of Wisconsin if we let those go. But I think we grabbed a couple of good ones. If we missed out on any of those that you recommended, we apologize. It was nothing to diss you whatsoever. It was just hard to narrow it down, Dan, because you and I both talked during the week as we started to go through some of these. You can go down a rabbit hole very quickly.
What a fun waste of time. What a glorious waste of time, because you could just do that and go, and then like you said, you had to kind of think to yourself, okay, can we do this one? Can we
Uh-huh.
not do this one? Because I know I sent some things to you, like, okay, we got to edit this part out.
Right.
We have to do this, that, the other thing. But it was a lot of fun. And I'll throw in there too. You get a lot of recommendations,
Yes.
multiple recommendations from the same movie. And so if
Yeah.
your recommendation is not on there, just know that maybe it's just simply because we got so many of them. We just had to pick one.
Yeah.
And it's kind of an homage to the entire movie in general, because you're going to hear a couple today where it's like, yeah, you had to throw them in there. You could have done just about anything and you had to do it.
And the thing is, and Charlie, see, you're of this generation that you have access to every movie as it was shown in the theaters. I'll say it that way, without any editing whatsoever. Dan and I are of the generation where I remember, if there was a hit movie, maybe it was a year later, and all of a sudden you started to see the advertisement Sunday night, ABC movie of the week, and they'll replay whatever that hit movie was. But what ends up happening is when you take some of the vulgarity and it's removed from whatever the lines are, it loses something, or they try to overdub a clean version of it. It takes something away, which is one of the reasons why we had to kind of abstain from a few clips, again, because we want to remain on the air. But two, when you start to dub those things, and I'm sure you get it when you have to dub certain things, here at the studio, it kind of loses it, right? Part of it, as far as the humor goes, has to do with every once in a while, maybe a 4-letter word gets thrown into the mix.
Having a little fun with it. And I'm not that young. Like, I still, in the 2000s, they were still doing that. You would notice it. You would see it sometimes. I will notice, like, with the clips that you pick, are movies just not as funny nowadays, too? You guys have, like, the latest one you have is Anchorman. That was still mid-2000s, right?
But, again, generational. We've got a generational gap in this studio between us and you behind the board. And so these, I think, were a lot of the ones that, we always harken back to. And I will guarantee, Charlie, as you get older and you start to reminisce about your college years and the movies you watched in college, you'll go back to them. You just will. They just have an imprint on your brain, on your soul, if they made you laugh, and then you remember who you were watching it with, or the people you watched it with multiple times and recited the lines back and forth. Those are the things that make the movies memorable, right? And that's what you end up doing.
What would you have picked that was not on the list? I mean,
go ahead, Charlie.
Right, yeah, go for it.
I mean, I have no clue. Like, looking at like some of the latest, like, I just watch so many movies nowadays. You get kind of overloaded with stuff that's from this era. Like, I've seen all of these movies multiple times, mostly because of my dad. But like,
way to go, Dad.
All of these, like, Anchorman 2 has some great lines. So if you wanted to go even like keep in the same vein, that's a newer one that has a lot of great lines in it. I think you could go with some of these like more recent, like Bert Kreischer. You see like all these guys that are coming out with their own movies and stuff that I'm not the biggest fan of, but I know people love them and people love the comedy that's a part of that. It's just different. Like, again, you're getting a lot more of these movies that are sticking around for longer periods of time than I think people expected them to because of the streaming service, because of all this. So I think it's fair to have all these, and I've seen all these. I'm sure I'm going to know all the lines that we're going to listen to here today. But at the same time, like, it feels like because they're sticking around longer on these streaming services that it pushes away some of the new stuff. You don't find that as often.
Yeah, that could very well be. And then we'll quiz Charlie. You got called on the carpet. Chuck put you on the carpet.
I did. When my dad texted me, what's wrong with you? I know that was bad. That was bad.
Basically, it was, who is Robert Plant? And Charlie, you initially responded with,
he's from The Who.
Yes, and that drew the ire of Chuck Garbedian, his dad.
Boy, I'm sorry, man. You walked right into that.
I did.
Dan, generational gap right here.
Yeah.
This is what we're talking about. All right, let's get into some sports, because that's really what we're here to talk about. And the draft has one more day left. We get rounds 4 through 7 taking place here as the Saturday progresses. So we'll get more college athletes taken off the board. But here's where I want to start. I'm watching, as I told you, Dan, earlier, again, off the air, I went down the rabbit hole of watching the Marino Elway 30 for 30 this morning before coming over to the studio. And watching that, again, with the helmet phones that you used to get when you got a subscription to Sports Illustrated. Everybody wanted a subscription to Sports Illustrated so you could get your helmet phone that you could, put in your room. but watching how the draft used to be, watching some of the players in that particular draft. Now, the storyline obviously is Elway goes, I'm not going to play. I'm going to go play for the Yankees. I don't want to play in Baltimore. There's that whole thing.
Yeah.
And Marino's sliding down the depth chart as far as the rankings go within the first round. But then you start looking at what other teams were taking, and you realize the amount of talent that was in that particular draft in 1983. But what I was also looking at is there was a time when you had certain schools that produced certain positions at a high level, right? Like USC was kind of running back you there for a little bit. Michigan kind of fell into that. Ohio State fell into that. So looking at the draft, and now with NIL, as the talent is becoming more and more dispersed, what schools, if you guys were both the GM, what 3 to 5 schools would you be focused in on because you trust the development of said players and they have a track record of putting their athletes at the pro level and them having impact? Who would you go to, Dan? Give me 3 to 5 schools as a GM.
All right. And I'll throw in the way you're describing it as these schools also tend to get the highest level recruits. These are grown men at 18 a lot of times. And I go in no particular order, but the first one that jumped into my mind right away was Alabama. And then I look at Ohio State. And then there was like this pause. Okay, those are the 2 that I would go to right away. Then I thought Miami. I thought Georgia. Those were the 4. And then because you said 5, I'm like, oh, what am I going to do? And then I got stuck. Like I couldn't figure it out. And I don't know what the 5th one would be. I'll go the dark horse. I might say Oregon.
Okay.
I don't know. So I'm going to turn that over to Charlie because I think he knows this better than we do.
I would have put Oregon in mind too. I think that was one that wasn't exactly a dark horse in my mind. They're one of the schools that consistently have NFL talent that sticks around. I think that's something that lasts to me. Miami, I put on my list. Ohio State, Alabama to some degree. I think they do really well with like defensive players and defensive linemen, but like quarterbacks, offensive line, wide receiver hasn't worked out nearly as well as it used to for them in a long time. So I think Alabama's kind of slowly falling off that. I think Texas A&M does a really good job at getting players ready for the NFL. They may not always have the best college record when it comes to just the regular season, but when these guys get to the NFL, when you get to the draft, you see Texas A&M guys flying off the board all the time. I think that's probably the group of schools that I'm looking at personally.
And you know what's funny to me is I agree with both what you guys have just said. But what are we missing? Oh, hello. Take 2. What are we missing? Yes, sir. We're not getting Michigan. Remember, Michigan for a period, as far as like linemen, a running back here and there, but as far as the guys in the dirt, so to speak, that front 7, either side of the ball, Michigan was in there. USC, I'll go back to. We used to get tailbacks and receivers, USC, UCLA. You don't necessarily, even though a couple of guys did get
wide
drafted.
Receiver for USC it has worked out pretty well recently. Drake London, Amon-Ra St. Brown, those guys are doing really well at the NFL level.
And now, but with that, and you're absolutely right, Charlie, we think more now of Ohio State, right? I mean, Ohio State now is producing receivers. So where I'm going with it is there's been this little bit of evolution that has taken place, again, because of NIL and the transfer portal, where we're now seeing talent dispersed. And I guess some of the old blue bloods, as far as the draft goes, they're not necessarily in the forefront to the levels they used to be when all the talent exactly went to Alabama. Georgia would have been the one I'd throw into the mix at, from what you guys were talking about, the West Coast teams and USC and UCLA. I mean, there were those 2 handfuls of teams where it seemed like every 5-star prospect went to. And now with the fact that the money is above board, we're seeing that dispersed a little bit.
But even with that, two schools that we didn't say, number 1, Texas, which would have been there. And the other one was LSU with all of, and you get so much chatter and so much coverage of those 2 programs. And they've had some epic players coming out of those programs. But recently it just feels like they're kind of an afterthought, which I think is weird because you don't really have a conversation about college football without talking about those two programs.
And part of the reason why I threw this out initially is, again, talking to the Money Train yesterday, we had a brief discussion about Ty Simpson from Alabama, Charlie, getting drafted.
Crazy.
And you see the pundits, right, that are like, oh my gosh, he's not the prototype, he's not this, he's not that. But then you listen to somebody like TA who's going, well, he played in SEC. He played for Alabama. It's not like he was playing at, name a Division II, Division III school or a small D1 school. So the level of competition was such. Now, there can be debate. Oh my gosh. Again, looking at that Marino Elway 30 for 30, Rutledge got picked before Marino, right? And I mean, Tony Eason got picked before Marino. So you've got people who will analyze, overanalyze, but there's always that human element that comes into play where you can push the analytics aside, and some people fall in love, for lack of a better word, with a certain player, and they just focus in on it. And so that's where, Charlie, I was a little curious about where we think most teams now are looking as far as let's draft from said school before said school.
Well, and I think it's just so hard because we talk about Texas specifically. Like, next year, they're going to be the belle of the ball at the draft. They're going to have Arch Manning. They have a couple wide receivers that are going to be part of that group. Offensive tackle is going to be big for Texas next season. Like, they're going to be the team of the draft next year. And then do we go back next year and say, oh, well, okay, Texas is back to where they are? Like, this year, Texas Tech has tons of players that get drafted in the first and second and third rounds over these, of course, these past few days. But maybe next year, Texas Tech isn't going to be that. I think it just changes so quick nowadays. And that when you look at a guy like Ty Simpson at Alabama, yes, he's playing SEC, but you still have to look at the history and say, you know what, Tua Tagovailoa is playing against a lot of those, and he hasn't really worked out the way people expected him to. I mean, you look at Mac Jones, and he's a backup quarterback in this league, and he may get a second chance, especially after playing well for San Francisco last season. But there's just history behind it that says that's not going to work out. At the same time, to your point, too, that guys just get fixated on some of these players. I don't really think it matters what school they're going to. The Colts were fixated on Anthony Richardson when they drafted Anthony Richardson.
Yeah,
it didn't
totally
matter
right.
that he had started 19 total games since high school. Like, that was absurd that they would have thought that his history would have led to that. But because he's this freak athlete, it didn't really matter what school. He could have been at UAB and they would have drafted him just because they felt like that type of player is what they needed. And Ty Simpson just doesn't fall into that, into my mind. Like, he just is a very basic style quarterback that is going to get the job done potentially, but not elevate you to the levels I think some of these other players and these teams are looking for. So that pick just felt out of the ordinary over the course of the past 5 drafts or so. So,
and when you brought up Richardson, Dan, it's always amazing to me that these scouts watch so much tape on a particular player. They'll go to games and watch in person. They'll do the interviews, but then suddenly they go to the combine, and because a kid jumped an inch higher or ran a few tenths of a second faster in the 40, like, all of that research just gets shelved because, to your point, they get fixated on a certain skill set, or they get enamored
body
by
type or something.
They get enamored by the fact that, in the underwear Olympics, they were wildly successful, but not necessarily on the field. That part of different teams in their draft rooms, to me, it's amazing. It's a study in psychology, sociology, any ology that a college campus offers could walk into one of those rooms and create a study on how people differentiate things, again, between just the analytical stuff and what they've seen on the field.
Just had this vision of a kid touring a campus and saying, I want to be an ologist. What do you got? Just walking in. You're talking about all these things, and you're talking about particularly, going to Indianapolis and doing the camp and all that. When you think about how easy it is to be wrong, I'm sure you'll remember the name Jamarcus Russell.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah.
I mean, wow. Yeah. Talk about just an epic failure on the part of scouting and the part of report. It was all wrong. And you ask yourself occasionally, how does this happen, right? Because these draft rooms, and now they've got so much more in terms of analytical data, and they dig so much deeper. But at the end of the day, they're all fallible, right? They can all. We've seen the Packers do it. We've seen the Cowboys do it. You pick your team, And yet we saw the Bears do it. I mean, you can pick any organization and they've had bad drafts. They've had bad picks. And so getting to where Green Bay was with their pick in the second round, I think about this, whenever you draft a cornerback, I'm to the point now, it's almost like drafting a wide receiver. You just don't know.
Yeah.
It's a crapshoot when you pick a defensive back, trying to hope that they'll be the right person. And I hope this guy is. I really do. But I look at that and I think, we need him. You got to have him in today's NFL, but it's tough.
Especially when you get to the second, third, fourth round. There's a couple of guys in that top 10, top 15 that when they were drafted, you're like, especially Ohio State, going back to a school again, where you're going, that this guy should be a plug and play type individual. But once, to your point, Dan, you get to that second, third, and fourth round, you just never know. And Charlie, what also amazes me, and I think where some people will have a pushback regarding Ty Simpson, it's the amount of games that a person plays. So Richardson, Indianapolis gets enamored with all of the physical capabilities and the analytics, but what did he play? Like 9 games?
19 games since high school.
Since high school, right? And so there's just not a lot of football on tape. You got guys today like Nussmeier from LSU who hasn't been drafted yet. Here's a guy who's got 40 some odd games in the books as a starter. That to me says more than maybe what a Ty Simpson. Now I get it. Nussmeier, there's questions about A, B, and C. There was health issues. There's all kinds of things that come into play why he's fallen down the board. But I have more faith, me personally, who gets to say these kinds of things without having any repercussions about making a pick, that I'll take a guy who's got 40 starts over a guy who's maybe got 19.
Yeah, but I think in today's world, you got to ask the question, are they having 40 starts because they're just not good enough to go to the NFL and they know they can make more money at the NIL level?
Hold that thought, because in the second hour, we're going to talk about that. Go ahead. I'm just
but yeah, just kind of you have to question why this guy is now staying 40 games at the college level. I think 20 years ago, when it was just normal for guys to do that, you could say, oh, he's a fifth-year senior. That says something about his love and loyalty for the school. You're not really attributing money to why he's doing that. But now you have to go, can he just make more money at NIL? Is he not good enough to go to the NFL? And a lot of people just told him that, so he stayed another year at the college level.
Well, again, we'll talk about this when we get back for our next segment, but I think there is truth to that because the NIL is offering so much more than maybe what a rookie contract will give you when you fall to the 4th, 5th, 6th round. But before we talk about that, Dan, I want to ask you, do you have at the quarterback position, do you believe in the theory of a prototype? And here's what I'm saying. Because of the fact that many of your offensive linemen now are in that 6'5" to 6'7" range that you hear and read, many NFL scouts want to see their quarterback probably somewhere in that 6'2" to 6'4" area, more like 6'4",
more definitely,
just so
like
they
6'4",
can see. And I know, and I apologize because I've used this story to death, but a couple of years ago when Braden Locke was the QB for the Badgers and they had Oregon on the ropes, who was number 1 at the time with a chance to win, and standing in the end zone, watching that last minute and change take over and seeing Braden Locke drop back into the pocket, I don't know how he saw anything, because you've got linemen that are 6'5". You had a defensive line in Oregon that was 6'5" to 6'7", all charging in at him. And he's expected, like any quarterback, to make an immediate decision and get the ball out. And I'm thinking, how do you make that decision? You're just guessing that your receiver is going to be in a particular spot at a particular time that you've worked on, because there was no way he could see. I literally, my heart went out to him. And I think it's one of the reasons why a Braden Locke, after leaving Wisconsin, he's a backup at Arizona. I know he hit the transfer portal again, and my apologies. I didn't look to see where he's landed for his extra season. But I think part of the issue is, even at a Power 4 conference, he's just too small. You can't see. It takes nothing away from his talent. He can sling the ball. I'm sure he's got great decision-making skills. He just can't see over everybody because of his size.
I think when you look at prototype, I think you are looking for taller individuals, number one. Taller individuals with sound mechanics, or sound mechanics can be taught.
Yeah.
There are some guys that kind of are atypical a little bit, but by and large, you're looking for somebody that can command the pocket, move around, make the hard throw. And I mean, like have the arm strength or can develop the arm strength. But where I get to, and it's a little bit of the Ty Simpson thing, is simply now they want guys that are kind of Aaron Rodgers-esque in terms of they can manipulate a game mentally. They can walk up to the line, they can make the adjustments, they can do the things. They've read a defense and now they know what to do. And they're looking for someone not only that has those physical attributes, but also has the cognitive attributes to be able to kind of, build into an NFL prototype.
All right, let's get to a break. On the other side of the break, let's kind of pick up what Charlie was talking about as far as guys who are staying for extra time, I'll put it that way, in college because they're going to make more on their NIL deal than their first year within the NFL. And we're starting really for the first time to see that evolve and play in real time as the NFL draft continues today. As we go to break, our thanks to Paul in Caledonia, who suggested some stuff from Airplane. So let's have Airplane snippets take us to break. This is College Sports Weekly live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios. As always, we are powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook.
Looks like I picked the wrong week to quit smoking. Looks like I picked the wrong week to quit drinking. Looks like I picked the wrong week to quit amphetamines.
Can you fly this plane and land it?
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
No, I flew single-engine fighters in the Air Force, but this plane has 4 engines. It's an entirely different kind of flying altogether.
It's an entirely different kind of flying.
War's over, man. Wermer dropped the big one.
What? Over? Did you say over? Nothing is over until we decide it is. Was it over when the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor? Hell no!
Germans? Forget it, he's rolling.
It ain't over now. Because when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Who's with me? Let's go! Come on!
All right, welcome in. It's College Sports Weekly live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios. We're powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook as we're going in and out today as we come in from break, out to break, with some great movie clips in that John Belushi Animal House. There, in that one monologue, or that one scene, we could have cut up I don't know how many. In fairness, maybe less than more, simply because some of the language again. However, that movie is fraught with all kinds of segments that we could utilize. Off the top
of your head.
Oh,
you know, you are a PIG pig. You know?
What do we got here? And, you know, the zip, the whole 9 yards. But anyway, so our thanks to everybody up in Green Bay that's listening to us on 99.7 FM and 1440 AM WNFL. In Wausau on 93.9 The Game, and Duluth Superior on 710 The Game, and then here in Milwaukee, 1250 AM, 105.7 FM on The Fan. And don't forget, you can find us on YouTube at Wisconsin Sports Radio. I said it right this time. So there we are. We're making our way through after a couple of Diet Dews. We're now awake and ready to roll. So I want to go back to what Charlie touched on, because it was a perfect segue for what I did want to talk about in this particular segment. And that's the fact that now we're seeing players at the football level of Division I college Power 4 staying an extra year or two where they originally would have come out. Think of some of the quarterbacks, like we were talking about Nussmeier before in the first segment. That's a guy that to me would have come out last year already, and some of these others would have come out last year because it was a chance now to get to the NFL and start making some money. But when you've got somebody like Chambliss over at Ole Miss, who's expected to make between $5 and $6 million this year alone, next year he goes into the NFL draft. To me, he's a 4th or 5th round pick who might make 7 figures in his first rookie deal within the NFL. So now we're getting these guys who want to stay. That's why we see the court system so bogged up, because everybody's petitioning the courts for that extra year of eligibility. And maybe the NCAA will get that law, whatever you rule, however you want to phrase it, that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, as far as here's your eligibility, you get X number of years starting with graduation or the age of 19, that will put this aside. But at least in the interim, Dan, right now, we're seeing players who are going to be drafted today that will make less in the NFL than they did in their senior year of college.
Yeah. Well, that's, I can't explain it. It's so backwards to me right now, where the goal is to get to the NFL as quickly as possible and then ultimately get to that second contract if you can, because that's where the money is made. That's what you're trying to do. And that's basically equal throughout sports. You walk in, you're drafted, you're kind of slotted into what your salary is going to be, and then the negotiations start if you're able to get that second contract. You know, I blame them? No. You know, I just laugh, because if you're making, $5 to $6 million a year, or let's just say you're just making a paltry 6 figures, 100,000 or something like that. How are you? Oh, I could go off on that. Don't get me wrong, because never mind. But I look at that and I think to myself, I'm going to take the money.
Yeah.
And I might go to class. I only have to get through the season, and then I'll find another spot where the grass is greener. I might make the same or more, whatever it's going to be. So I look at these guys coming through like, yeah, really? You spend nothing but time, doing what you were hired to do, which is play football, but I'm not buying that you're going to graduate anytime soon.
Well, when's the last time we heard of anyone with an eligibility scare? I'll say it that way. You go back, a decade or two, and you would have heard, well, we've got some concerns about the academic side of this particular individual. That is non-existent anymore. And then, Charlie, let's talk about Carson Beck, who got drafted yesterday, is going to Arizona. His contract probably, though he goes in the third, will probably be about half of what he made at Miami. And if you remember back to the national championship game when they had media day and a reporter asked about class, he's like, class, I don't go to class anymore. It's one of, to me, the issues that the NCAA has to address. I don't want to go there right now, but it's the fact that here is a kid who went to Miami, got his name back up in stature as far as the NFL goes, got drafted by Arizona, but yet, even though he goes in the third round, again, will make about half as a pro than what he did in college.
Yeah, it's pretty absurd. First of all, I just thought, with Carson Beck, this whole jumping from Georgia to Miami didn't really make sense because I feel like, yes, he made enough money at Miami that it made him want to go. But at the same time, you spent so long at Georgia, just stay at Georgia, where they're still going to pay you a ton of money, where you still have an opportunity to be a grad student there and figure out the situation there. So already from that initial decision, it just felt wrong that he was in a Miami uniform. I'm a Miami fan. He was awesome this season, helped lead them to the national championship. That was really cool. At the same time, it was always just like, oh, but Carson Beck's the quarterback of my team. And I think he understands that and knows that and gets that even with this negative push from the outside, that money is still worth it more than an NFL gig. And that when he gets drafted, he's not going to be crying the same way Caden McDonald is because he knows he's giving up more money. Caden McDonald is probably bawling his eyes out because he knows this NFL contract is going to be more than what he got his whole life, even in college, when he was still getting paid probably millions of dollars to be a part of Ohio State's defense, one of the key parts of Ohio State's defense. It just all feels so wrong to me. And at the same time, when you ask for the NCAA to do something about the way these players are jumping and for the reasons that they're jumping, and then that they're not even doing anything at their new schools worthwhile outside of playing football, that just all feels so wrong. You have to convince the schools that that's wrong. And I think that's almost impossible at this point when they're making so much money off of these programs. And that, yes, we are a university first, but that's truly only in name at points here. Some of these places could not care less about what the regular student base is doing as long as the sports teams are doing fine.
That's true. And at what point, Dan, to what Charlie was talking about, where athletes are jumping, right? We can go, if we go basketball, it's the AJ, I can call it the AJ Storr phenomenon, where he jumped every year of high school and every year of college.
Braden Locke is at Tarleton State, by the way. I looked that up.
Where in heaven's name is
well, they're the Tarleton State Texans, so I'm going to assume it's in Texas.
Okay.
Wow.
Right. Well done on the research.
Wow, absolutely.
You just reminded me of AJ Storr. That was
Tarleton. Texans.
Okay.
Way to be original, Tarleton. All right. So I look at somebody like Fernando Mendoza, who once again is a transfer who becomes the number one pick. Do we get to a point, again, I go back to the AJ Storr thing, where guys or girls or women are transferring from college to college to college, where those at the pro level start to put question marks over their name and go, I'm not quite sure if this individual's commitment is to what it's supposed to be. I mean, I've heard Green Bay will bring their draft choices in and say, listen, guys, this is the pros. There is no transfer portal. So learn how to put your big boy pants on, suck it up, and let's get through whatever adversity we got to get through. But I just wonder, when these guys are transferring, do the pro teams, regardless of the sport, begin to question whether or not this individual has the tenacity and the fortitude to do what they need to do once adversity hits?
That's part of the quagmire that these teams have to go through to kind of figure this out, because each one of these stories are going to be different. It's easy to put kind of a darker spin on this and say, yeah, you're jumping from school to school, and therefore you're not showing the maturity and the discipline that the actual commitment that we think you need to see. But in some cases, when they interview these student athletes, they're going to look at them and say, no, it made sense. You made, either, for example, if there's a program that produces offensive linemen and you want to make it to the NFL and you have a chance to start for that program, well, I get it. I think I might make that move too. And so each one's got to be weighed on its own merit a little bit, but there is going to come that point where now these these professional football programs, these scouting departments have to look at the guys that are jumping from spot to spot, and they have to figure it out for themselves. They have to hear the answers from these prospects, and then they have to decide, do you believe that or not? Because with every draft process, you hear about a handful of athletes that just talk themselves out of being selected by their maturity, their lack of preparation, doing all those things. And yeah, programs are going to have to decide whether or not jumping from one university to another university is an indicator that. I don't know that it's going to be just a flat, flat curve all the way through.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how things play out. Listen, before we get to break, I want to throw out one name. I don't think he's going to get drafted, but I expect to hear him signed as a free agent on Monday or Sunday, whenever the dust settles and they're allowed to sign free agents. And that's Caleb Blaha, the quarterback from UW River Falls. He was the Gagliardi Trophy winner last year, which is the Division III equivalent of the Heisman. Wins a national championship at UW River Falls. I think he's got the skill set and the tools to be someone who finds himself on a practice squad. I don't think he makes the final roster cut, but I could see somebody like Blaha sticking with a team that will utilize him on the practice squad, and then I wouldn't be surprised to see him next season in the UFL. And I'm already, in watching some of these games, starting to hear them talk about the UFL now as kind of what the G League is for the NBA, where guys can, again, put some film out there, have some tape where they might be able then to get pulled into whatever NFL team, which I think is a smart move. Let's stop talking about the UFL as just spring football and the competitor to the NFL. I think the NFL needs to sit down with The Rock, since he's part owner, and say, listen, let's embrace this thing together. And let's start treating this as a way for some of these guys now to move into the NFL. All right, when we come back, we'll get to some headlines. We'll let Anchorman do that for us. And our way out, a little Jackie Gleason, Smokey and the Bandit. This is it. Oh, my gosh. It's College Sports Weekly, live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios, powered by the powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook.
There's no way that you could come from my loins. As soon as I get home, the first thing I'm gonna do is punch your mama in the mouth.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent and horrifying news story. And I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen. Cannonball!
Do you know who I am?
No, I can't say that I do.
I don't know how to put this, but I'm kind of a big deal.
Really?
People know me.
Welcome in. It's College Sports Weekly.
That's how I greet my daughters.
I was going to say Will Farrell and Dan Underberg on the clip there as we make our way back in. We're live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios. We are powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook as we get to some news and notes here before we get to the top of the hour. Guys, we've got a team playing for a national championship later this afternoon, and that's the men's volleyball team over at Carthage College. They'll take on Springfield College. That match starts at 6 p.m. Let's hope Carthage can pull off the championship. They've been a dominant force in men's volleyball at the Division III level. They get that championship tonight, and we hope to then have Coach on next week as part of our show.
Yeah, and when you look at men's volleyball, we've seen the growth of women's volleyball, like this astronomical ascension that they've had. You wait for men's volleyball to do the same because the athleticism it takes to play.
Yeah.
Is and just the reaction time and everything that you see is an amazing game. So hopefully this is a way to establish Wisconsin again. Wisconsin is a really, really nice well of volleyball talent that we've seen, kind of grow throughout the club levels. And, the average fan may not know it, but outside of that, there's a lot of universities that look to the state of Wisconsin to find their talent.
All right. So good luck to Carthage as they compete again tonight, 6:00 for a national championship. One other note that I found kind of ironic, I guess, as we were talking about college athletes and the comparison of going to the NFL, and that is Audie Crooks, who was the center at Iowa State, who I believe now is headed to Oklahoma State or South Carolina, one of those two, but whatever the case may be, looking at about a 7-figure salary for her NIL deal. That makes her the third highest paid women's basketball player. So the only two above her are in the WNBA, and then there she is with her NIL deal. She'll get to play
God
one more
bless
year.
higher ed.
Yeah, there you go. All right, top of the hour. When we come back, let's compare and contrast what teams look like right now between the Badgers and Marquette with the NIL as we get to a break. It's College Sports Weekly, live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios. We're powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook.
basketball, football, baseball. From Division 1 to Division 3, it's time for College Sports Weekly with Dom Macholis and Dan Underberg on the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network.
Now, we could fight them with conventional weapons. That could take years and cost millions of lives. No. No, in this case, I think we have to go all out. I think this situation absolutely requires a really futile and stupid gesture be done on somebody's part.
We're just the guys to do it.
Let's do it.
Come in. It's College Sports Weekly live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios. As always, we are powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook. Don't forget, you can follow us on YouTube and on the artist formerly known as Twitter, which is now X, at Wisconsin Sports Radio. Don Wachillis along with the Professor Dan Underberg, Charlie Usen. We've got another hour to go here on this week's show. And I want to turn now to basketball. Next segment, I want to talk about the lack of spring games, because today would have been the spring game for the Wisconsin Badgers, but they've decided not to, and they're not the only ones. Right. This is not a Luke Fickell, what are you doing kind of a moment. We've got a lot of teams that are kind of shying away from the spring game, but we'll talk about that in the next segment. But I want to talk right now about where we stand, at least on paper, looking at the Badgers and the Marquette Golden Eagles. Now that the transfer portal is closed, we know who's left, we know who we've brought in, and do we think, as it stands on April 25th, that these teams have gotten better, have slightly gotten worse, or have just hit, the same level? They're even, so to speak, for lack of a better way of saying it. Now, I want to start with the Wisconsin Badgers. We know John Blackwell has left and gone to Duke. First of all, before we get into, and my apologies to my friend over at the BP, as I stop in every week to get my soda and the waters and what have you, and he asked me today about John Blackwell, and then went off on a diatribe. He's like, the kid is gone. I could care less anymore. He's left the Badgers, but I'm going to bring it up anyway. So my apologies. Don't hit the cash register. Don't lose your mind. We're going to talk about him for a moment. Again, I don't mind when a guy like John Blackwell leaves with 1 year of eligibility. I think, listen, you can go test your waters. To me, he's a guy who's only going to have 4 years of college eligibility. He's not going to be petitioning for a 5th, 6th, 7th year. So if you're going to go elsewhere, fine. I was a little surprised with Duke. Now, reportedly, we're looking at $5 million that he could be making going to Duke. And again, when he gets drafted, and I think he will after next season, unless something miraculous happens to John Blackwell, a second-round pick, maybe a G League guy for a while, maybe a guy who's your 10th, 11th guy on the bench. Again, I have no idea, because he still has a year to develop and hone his skill set before heading over to the NBA or to Europe. Who knows at this point? But were you surprised at all, Dan, that it was Duke of some of the others that were being mentioned, like Illinois, for example, where his dad played, as a potential possibility, or on the West Coast, suddenly the UCLAs of the world kind of reared their head up and got into the mix?
I won't say that I was shocked it was Duke. I think because they had been on the short list of media coverage for a while. I was a little surprised it took as long as it did to make that happen. I think it's probably to his credit. He was kind of playing the game of who's going to make me the better offer and playing them against each other. I'm going to be curious with Blackwell now just to see what we had. Now he's playing in one of the preeminent programs. He's being paid possibly $5 million a year. So he's being paid to play. He's not going to be sitting the bench. And if he excels, and I don't mean just play well, but excels, then we're going to look back at his time in Wisconsin like, what did we do? We had this guy, we lost this opportunity to really let him kind of take the reins a little bit. I don't know that I expect that, but the goal here, obviously, I think, is to play in that preeminent program, to get in that draft and make the next step up, which he can do. And again, we'll find out just exactly how good he is now, because he's got talent in all the spots all the way around him. So now it's his job. It's his job to shine and really kind of direct the team.
And Charlie, I think the sleepless nights in the past for many coaches were, what high school recruit can I get? Can I get this 5-star or this 4-star kid? But to Dan's point, I think now one of the sleepless nights that occur for many coaches is if a Blackwell leaves, if an AJ Storr, who packed up his bag and then went to Kansas and then kept moving on from there, whatever the scenario might be, if they excel in a different program, then suddenly the eyes of the in-state fans begin, as Dan was saying, to look at said coach and go, well, what are you doing? How did you let that walk out the door? I think about that a lot on the football side. When you think of the Watt family and you think of when we had Russell Wilson and you think of some of the players that went on to have these miraculous NFL careers that played exceptionally well at Wisconsin, but yet we never found ourselves vying for a national championship, where we had a quarterback for a year who ends up going on to win a Super Bowl in his prime. Those, to me, are now the scenarios that keep coaches awake when guys leave and then potentially have the ability to excel and knock someone's socks off.
Well, and I think you're seeing that with football. Like Riley Nowakowski went through the Badger system and ends up at Indiana, ends up winning a national championship with Indiana while being an important piece of that team in that offense. And at the same time that I do see that as being a sleepless night maybe for Luke Fickell, I guess I still don't see that outward pressure from the fan base yelling at him about losing Riley Nowakowski and him being an important part of what Indiana did. And I think with John Blackwell, if he were to go to Duke and play really well, which, like, frankly, I don't know if I expect that. He got overshadowed by 2 straight guys, 2 straight years, when he was supposed to be able to be in the running for taking the reins of the Wisconsin Badgers basketball program. So I guess I just I don't think it's going to work out that way. But if it does, I think that says more to me personally about how good John Tonje actually might be and how good Nick Boyd might actually be. And that if John Blackwell, maybe we're given a bigger opportunity, he could have done something with that. But the fact that those 2 guys overshadowed, before I start thinking about, Greg Card, how did you misuse him so bad? Because he didn't. And I think if you're looking at, the Badgers going to the second round of the tournament, if they make it to the Sweet 16, we discussed preeminent programs, but like that's an eminent program then. And then does he just go to the draft? Now, are we talking about this the same way that we are now if they had 1-2 more games in the NCAA tournament?
It's a great point. You made some really good points there, Charlie. Let's look now at the transfer portal again, which is closed. The guys who have left. We've been talking about John Blackwell. Alexis Bieliskauskas, the big Lithuanian, has parted ways. And the more we've read about how centers were being valued this year, here's a guy who jumped ship because obviously there was another university that was looking for a big man and paid more money than what Wisconsin was willing to pay. And I don't blame Wisconsin in this case, because I thought Alexis grew as the season went, but I don't think he developed into kind of the rim protector, the muscle that they had hoped in the paint during his year with Wisconsin. So in my mind, good for Alexis. I hope things work out. And maybe a couple of more years down the line, he will be the guy I think many had hoped. But then I also think you were, a semi-pro athlete in Europe. You came over and it just, you didn't, to me, have the tenacity that was necessary to play in the Big Ten. So he's parted ways. Ricardo Greppi has left. Jack Robinson has left. And then we know that we've seen Victor Onetu, Elon Elmer, and Trey Autry added to the mix. We find out this week Nolan Winter has signed his contract, not a scholarship. He signed his contract. Great to see that Winter is back along with Rapp. You've got a couple of foundational pieces there in Madison, which I think Greg Gard really hangs his hat on, making sure that nowadays at least there's a couple of guys who can kind of carry the culture and the tradition forward. So when you look at this on paper, this to me is one of those instances, Dan, where I don't know who you would get to replace Nick Boyd and John Blackwell, what they gave you last season as one of the most prolific backcourts in college basketball. Who would you get to replace that would elevate your program? I think what they got are some really strong pieces. I think they've got a couple of guys now who can shoot the basketball, because Gard has definitely transitioned his offensive style into shooting from beyond the arc. I think we've got a couple of those, but I really don't know how or what he could have done given the NIL structure at Wisconsin to replace, again, one of the most prolific backcourts. So at best, I think right now I'm calling Wisconsin even at best, when in actuality, I think on paper they're slightly below.
Well, yeah, I think they're slightly below just because of the talent that was lost. But as in all things that we've had in the past 2 to 3 years with Wisconsin and their work in the portal, you simply don't know. And the thing where I have hope is because of the portal has worked for them the last 2 to 3 years. They have found guys that have elevated their game and have been better as a result of coming to Madison. And you look at, for example, Trey Autry coming from George Washington, a guy that is successful at shooting the three.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, again, as you mentioned, what Wisconsin wants to do. I think this is probably a pretty good match. Now, the question is, when we saw with Nick Boyd, a guy that could just create his own play, kind of dagger into the lane and get you to when you needed it. Are these two people that can do that? We don't know yet. And so I think with every team, every year before NIL, before the portal, every team is subtly different. You got guys transitioning out due to senior year, new freshmen coming in, but now how quickly does this new group gel again? And that's just now what we did with every team deals with in college basketball and college football.
And Charlie, that's one of the things, to Dan's point, I think we hold criticism now till almost the first to second week of January, because those holiday tournaments, the non-conference games, are really when a Greg Gard, a Shaka Smart, you name the coach, can really get that team gelling in hopes of doing what they need to do once you get into the meat and potatoes of conference play, because these guys aren't together all the time. Yes, they're together over the summer. You go through practice, the weight training, all of those things, but you really now need that end of November, December to really allow these guys an opportunity to kind of mold, to come together. And I think we saw it last year again with Nick Boyd, whose speed was so incredible on the floor that it took time for him to back off at times and the other guys to step up at times before they found that sweet spot in the middle. And then the Badgers had the success that they did in the regular season. It just needs time now to develop.
I think my worry is with this team moving forward this year is like John Blackwell, at least when you do need that time to develop, he can be that primary ball handler, the guy that's initiating things and kind of keep control of things. The guys that are coming back this year, in Nolan Winter and Austin Rapp, while they are important parts of this team, I think what they do is definitely more kind of watching for their personal growth. And I don't think what their game or play style is really translates, I guess, as well when you're talking about just John Blackwell being able to just play with any team. Basically, these guys have to play off of the other three guys that are going to be put on the court with them, and I think that's going to take longer. And if that doesn't work out nearly as well, you don't have a John Blackwell just to come back and take over. Trey Autry could be that, but you just don't know that yet. You haven't seen that yet. As much as I want to believe in Greg Gard, I'm watching the Milwaukee Brewers and their bullpen kind of implode a little bit. A lot of people just assume they'd be okay because Chris Hook is the pitching coach and that Pat Murphy is the manager of this team. But now you're seeing a lot of issues grow there. So you still have to be critical of these guys, even if they have history of being able to do this. If it doesn't work out with Trey Autry, I don't think that Austin Rapp and Nolan Winter pick up the game as well as John Blackwell maybe could have, or any of these other guys that could stick around and be the main ball handler and score.
I want to see something in print. I'll say it that way. I would love to know behind the scenes, Dan, with how long it really took Blackwell to ink his deal with Duke, if there was any discussion with the Badgers about coming back. Because to Charlie's point, when you look at a Trey Autry, from what we've seen at George Washington, is a catch and shoot. He's not necessarily a ball handler like Nick Boyd was.
Right.
And the things that we read about John Blackwell was, I want to be the guy. I want to be the general, so to speak. I want to be the point guard. I just wonder if there was any conversation before he signed with Duke looking at who the Badgers have brought in and them saying, listen, if you come back, you got the show. You're going to be our point guard. You understand how to run this offense. We've brought in a very capable Trey Autry, but he's going to kind of be what you were last season with Nick Boyd running the offense. And really, you almost then would reverse roles in this hypothetical situation that I'm describing. I just really wonder if there was any still behind the scenes talk about returning after saying I'm jumping into the transfer portal.
Yeah, I wonder about that too. But I think some of those conversations are happening near the end of the season or throughout the season. What are we going to do if? My feeling is that a guy like Ray Gard's got a pretty good idea who's coming and who's going, and probably had a sense that John Blackwell was getting ready to make a difficult decision to move on. And yeah, the conversations could have been had like, this is our plan. But I also look at these college coaches and they know also who they have on the bench, who they think is ready to make a step up a little bit, or who they're willing to kind of go through some of the growing pains just to get them to that next year and let them, ascend a little bit. So it's hard to know for sure, why Blackwell made the decision he made and what everybody knew. But I will say there was nothing surprising about John Blackwell leaving. It felt like the time was right for him to do it.
Yeah.
Like he was itching to go. He didn't say anything, but it just made sense. Again, before the NIL, before the portal, you'd have guys do that. I've spent my 3 years here of eligibility, and I just need to try something else. I get it.
Absolutely.
So I don't blame Blackwell, but yeah, I will never know until Gard writes a book.
That's true.
So
that's true. And I think that's where the transfer portal is in its sweet spot, so to speak, where a guy's given a university 3 years, let's say, and says, hey, I want to go experience this university, this coach, this program, because I have 1 year of eligibility left, and then I'm going to roll the dice and, and see what happens. And you will then still have people who will say, no, I love it here. I'm going to stay, like a Nolan Winter. Let's flip other side of the state. Let's go to Marquette. For the first time since 2022, I think it's been 4 to 6 years since Shaka's gone into the transfer portal, now does so and picks up Sonata Frew from Louisville. Marquette loses Sheik Pearson, Zayd Lowry, Sean Jones, Trey Norman. And when I look at who Marquette, has lost, they were integral parts of what Shaka does at Marquette. But when you see a Zayd Lowry going to Dayton, when you see a Sean Jones going to Toledo, they're heading closer to home. They're playing not necessarily in conferences that are the equivalent of the Big East. Sheik Pearson and Trey Norman, these are the kind of instances as someone who reads and looks at these things I worry about, because now here's two guys who haven't found a home yet. What happens to them? You left a Division I Power 4 Big East school trying to test the waters, and now you're kind of stuck in the quagmire. Number three. There we go again. All right, let's
ding.
Let's try and get to number 4 in the next segment. However, I love what Marquette has done in holding on to the players they did, adding Frew to the mix. So in contrast, see what I did there?
Yeah,
that was nice.
Way
In contrast,
to compliment yourself, man. Nice job.
Excuse me, I got to step off the soapbox.
You can talk normal now. He's bragging ahead of himself.
Hey, over there. I think Marquette is better at this moment on paper than where they were at the end of the season.
Yeah, I think they are too. And I think it's not just because of the portal, although they got a big one from Louisville. I mean, that it was a great signing by Shaka Smart. I think Marquette was going to be better simply because of the improvement in the last half of the season and the young players that they have. But now that you have, Sonata Frew in there, you have someone that hopefully can give you that established presence on the inside, that athletic presence on the inside, that might open up more for everybody on the court and make Marquette just automatically a better team. And it's not just about him, but man, I don't know what I was expecting that Marquette was going to get, but I didn't know that it was going to be Frew.
Right.
And I think it's going to be an exciting time, coming up in 2026, 27 to be, a Golden Eagle fan.
And it was a great job, Charlie, I think, by Shaka to get Frew simply because of the fact that Louisville is spending a boatload of
Oh
money
my goodness, yeah.
this year in the NIL and signed, I think, in essence, Fru's competition, with the Louisville Cardinals. And Fru's like, I got one more year. Let me see what the market is. I think it was a great job by Shaka to understand the situation at Louisville and get in there as quickly as he did to pull that young man into the Golden Eagle program.
Well, and he really, Shaka Smart, that is, feels like he went into this transfer portal season knowing exactly what he needed and knowing which guys needed that too, and knew that Sananda Fru needed a shot to be a starting center consistently in a power conference, and he came in and did that. He brings in Nolan Minisale too. That's another big pickup at the shooting guard position that can slide right in immediately as a starter or as a sixth man, and you can use him and his skills to that. And he's a hometown kid. That always makes it more fun.
And you what's funny is when we had Ben on last week, right?
Yeah.
And Ben was kind of alluding to this is what was coming. I didn't have Nolan on the radar. I don't know what I was looking at.
After Ben said that, I immediately looked it up and saw that it was him.
And on the radar. But it's a great get. Again, what I see from Shaka, but we especially see this from Bart Lundy and Doug Gottlieb at UW Green Bay, are guys who were lured away from the area to wherever, right? The Alabamas, the Minnesotas, wherever the case may be. And then it doesn't play out the way they thought or what maybe they were promised in their recruiting trip. And then you get the Gottliebs and the Lundys of the world who understand this is our opportunity to pull these guys back into the fold. It gets them closer to home. Their families can be around. They get a fresh start. And I think that's where Lundy and Gottlieb, especially Gottlieb this past year, had done good work along with Bart Lundy in bringing these guys back into the mix. They leave the excitement of going somewhere else, the excitement of being recruited by whatever program. There's something, talk about a soapbox to jump off of that. Talking, it's awesome because you've got these guys that you see on TV outside of the state, know who you are, respect your game, go right on down the line. But then it doesn't work out. And then the Bart Lundys and Doug Gottliebs of the world reach their tentacles out and go, come on back in. You're going to get playing time. The family's going to be closer, and it helps sustain their programs. I mean, Bart Lundy had a rough year, and it was all because they were a mash unit. Unfortunately, the injury bug hit that team hard. I look at Bart Lundy to get back to that 20-game win platform that he had set for himself as far as the bar goes, and I expect Doug Gottlieb, whether it's 20 wins or not, to continue to build on what he's done at UW Green Bay.
Yeah, going back off of what you said a little bit about, looking at Lundy and Gottlieb and being able to welcome people home, I think a bigger part of the recruiting element is just, especially now with the portal, is leaving a positive impression, even if that athlete that you're recruiting chooses to go to the Alabamas or wherever they're going. Right. When an athlete decides that this is not working out and they want to test the portal, that positive relationship that you had with the head coach, with the staff, with the recruiters, that makes it a little bit more plausible to go back to that place that you may have declined earlier and to kind of that, just kind of have a soft landing spot, so to speak. So, it over time to be the person that kind of gracefully said, okay, you're going to go somewhere else. We're disappointed, but not, burning bridges, allowing that athlete to come back after they weren't able to get off the bench and feeling that there's a home there. Like, yeah, you can play here. You're going to do well here. I think is just as important as how you recruit the guys that you were able to capture.
Charlie, Dan's got a good point in the fact that, a lot of those assistant coaches, are still making sure their contacts are strong with varying high schools and AAU coaches, because many a times that's who those kids are going back to talk to.
Sure.
They're going back to vent, or the parents are going there to vent and saying, it's not Charlie's calling us and saying, this is not what they promised. And then all of a sudden they help make that connection once again. And to Dan's point, here's a soft landing spot. Come on back home, play some D1 basketball, and either you build your name back up or you find yourselves a nice fit in a program that will allow you the opportunity to play the remainder of your eligibility.
Right. They know how to sell that a lot more without the money. I think right now some of these coaches at the bigger schools find themselves kind of just throwing money at people. And then when it does come to actually needing to recruit and then talk to these players and get them emotionally invested in the university too, they find that really hard. Like at these smaller schools, you only have so much money to go around. So then you have to recruit the old way. You got to go back and try to get these kids emotionally invested, and they're really good at that.
All right, let's get to a break. On the other side of the break, let's look at the D3 top 25 for baseball and then pivot again and talk about what used to be an exciting day, at least for college football fans, with all the spring games that would take place on the next couple of weeks. We had a few last week. We would have had more today. ESPN is covering a bunch of them that are taking place around the country. However, we're not going to have one in Madison, and we'll get to that. Before we get to the break, let's listen in. Bull Durham, one of the great epic, you got to get your head out of the you-know-what, like speeches to get the team back going. This is College Sports Weekly, live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios. We are powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook.
Everybody into the shower! Anybody in the shower in 10 seconds gonna get fined $100! Larry! 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5 Mississippi, 6 Mississippi, 7 Mississippi, 8 Mississippi, 9 Mississippi, 10 Mississippi. You guys, you lollygag the ball around the empty. You lollygag your way down to first. You lollygag in and out of the dugout. Do you know what that makes you, Larry? Lollygaggers. Lollygaggers. What's our record, Larry? 8-16. 8-16. How'd we ever win 8? It's a miracle. It's a miracle. This is a simple game. You throw the ball, you hit the ball, you catch the ball. You got it!
So I jump ship in Hong Kong, and I make my way over to Tibet, and I get on as a looper at a course over there in Himalayas.
A looper?
A looper. You know, a caddy, a looper. Jack. So I tell them I'm a pro Jack. And who do you think they give me? The Dalai Lama himself, the 12th son of the Lama. The flowing robes, the grace, bald. Striking. So I'm on the first tee with him. I give him the driver. He hauls off and whacks one. Big hitter, the Lama. Long. Into a 10,000-foot crevice right at the base of this glacier. Do you know what the Lama says?
No.
Gunga Galunga. Gunga Gunga La Gunga. So we finish 18, and he's gonna stiff me. And I say, hey, Lama, hey, how about a little something, you know, for the effort, you know? And he says, oh, there won't be any money. But when you die, on your deathbed, you will receive total consciousness. So I got that going for me, which is nice.
It's College Sports Weekly, live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios. We are powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook. Again, you can find us on our socials at Wisconsin Sports Radio, or you can join the conversation by texting 414-677-1250. Yeah, it's hard, again, to narrow for as many things. Look at what we were talking about, the movies we were talking about during the break amongst us, the different snippets you could pull out of those. But it was fun, and love some Caddyshack.
But some of that Caddyshack, it's just you can still hear that scene, right?
Yes.
And you can hear and you see and almost feel the pitchfork on your neck.
Yep.
which was great. And the same thing when he's doing his master's bit,
right?
And which we've all wanted to do, haven't we? Walk into someone's flower garden and just
or while you're out in the yard doing yard work,
Yeah.
you know, you're swinging, it's in the hole. So we're all set with that. Let's get to some spring football, which really exists differently in the age of the NIL and transfer portal. And I want to get your take, because quite honestly, today would have been a great day to take the show on the road and broadcast from the spring game, which was always fun for the fans to, you know, go into Camp Randall, watch in essence a practice, just like when we have, you know, the day up at Green Bay when you have the inter-squad scrimmage, which is now is just a practice, but you get to watch.
Yep.
For the kids, it's a great way for them, I think, to experience Camp Randall, because you're not necessarily stuck there for 4 quarters, especially if you got little ones. And they were towards the end of what spring football was, doing things where the kids could come down, meet the players, take pictures, those kinds of things. And that's kind of gone by the wayside. Now, today is the final practice to be held at Camp Randall. It's closed. Again, not a spring game format. And I'm wondering, in your mind, Professor, is it a smart move? Because I think some coaches now are worried about their players being seen, let's say, because later today, Minnesota's spring game is going to be on TV. There was one more I noticed that'll be, Oregon. I think they're going to be showing the Oregon spring game, that I think, you know, scouts, coaches, agents, whatever the case may be, are looking at it and then getting into the ear of the player, because we can talk about the transfer portal being closed, but the portal is, you know,
it's always open.
It's always open. Yeah. There is nothing legally that closes the window, so to speak, and those contracts aren't binding. So if, you know, another school comes in and offers more money based on what they're seeing in a spring football game, the kid might just get up and leave. And I think that's where the fear lies these days, with the fact that many of them are not necessarily doing a scrimmage the way they used to. But I'll tell you what, I thought it was a great way to kind of continue the hype machine going into the summer, to be excited about your home state school going into next season, especially with all of the questions leading into what will take place next year at Camp Randall.
Yeah, when you look at Wisconsin, it was always built into the idea of a day-long celebration. You had the run in the morning, you had the 5K run in the, or more than 5K, whatever it was, in the morning, and then you would have effectively your game after that. And then, you know, in Wisconsin, a week later, you have Mifflin Street Block Party. It's a whole nother conversation. But I don't really feel like I've lost something, not being critical of Wisconsin and the struggles that they've had in the last couple of years. Just don't feel like I've ever lost something by not seeing a spring game. It was more like just the rite of passage of we're almost done with the spring. We're moving into the summer. It was fun to talk about for 24 hours and then we just move on to something different. So I think you make a good point about wanting to protect your program in terms of who could see it and who's going to have eyes on it. And I understand all that, but my brain, when I think about spring football, always goes back to Wisconsin's lead wide receiver at the time, Lee Evans.
Mm-hmm.
Lee Evans gets injured, that just shreds his knee in a spring game, loses an entire season. Now, in his case, it's a happy ending. He comes back the next year. He's a first-round draft pick for the Buffalo Bills and so on, right? But in a lot of cases, you're risking those things because you were asking your players to play 100% level football. And you risking those injuries, you were dealing with concussions, you were dealing with all those things that, were not part of the lexicon back then. So, great. Minnesota's going to have a spring game. Mm-hmm. It's going to be on TV. I'm sure that's great for recruiting. But then again, it's Minnesota, so what?
But to your point, and Charlie, I'll let you respond to it this way. It was a way to bring the community together. Even if now we open up Camp Randall and it's just a practice.
Right.
It's not necessarily a game, but we get to be there. We get to watch the practice. We get to start now looking at numbers and names and thinking about people that might have an impact going into next season. Because to your point, you'd have the run, you'd have the what I'll call the spring game or a spring practice as it's kind of evolved. And then I remember going with my daughter and then going into the field house because the women's volleyball program had their inter-squad scrimmage. So you got to watch a little women's volleyball as part of the family activities that were taking place. And I think in this day and age, with where the football program is, any way to embrace the fan base is something they need to be thinking about. And heaven knows I'm not getting into the AD discussion like we went down that rabbit hole last week. But I think it's part of what this Badger program needs to do to bring people back into the fold, because the football program does not exist at the stature it did 5, 10, 15 years ago.
Well, and I guess in my mind, it hasn't been about the community. Like any spring practice for any of these teams hasn't really been about the community since, what was it, 2018 when UCF started putting the social media tags on the back of their jerseys during these spring games. It started about selling their players and selling these guys and making sure that you get the notoriety from the rest of the country, not just from your community. And I think when you are doing that, talking about Lee Evans, a lot of these younger players, a lot of these guys that are trying to make a name for themselves might end up doing something stupid in order to get a highlight play that gets put on social media with their tag on it, and then everybody knows their names, and that they're trying to sell themselves to these scouts, to these people that are there, the agents that want these players to come to their schools, be a part of their agencies. It just stopped being about the community. And I think you look at what Minnesota's doing and putting it on ESPN, like that's not for Minnesota. That's for the United States to know, hey, PJ Fleck in Minnesota, they're getting going here. That's not for the University of Minnesota and their fans and their families to say, hey, we're excited for football season. It's about selling these guys now. And I think when you're Wisconsin, coached by Luke Fickell, the past couple of years, you haven't earned that. And I think Luke Fickell understands that. I think Luke Fickell is looking at these guys and saying, hey, I don't want stupid stuff to happen. I don't want people talking to other people because you guys are here and we have to take a next step. And what this practice is about taking a next step. It's not about selling yourself, because that's not where we're at right now.
Mm-hmm. So is it what Charlie is saying, is that then a byproduct just having butts in the seats? Because we've got social media teams with all of these universities who are putting things out there as highlight reels to begin with. So are we avoiding putting fans in the seats for the fans going ahead and putting highlight reels together? Or do you just think that some of these student athletes would do something a little bit crazier because there might be 10,000 people sitting there watching?
I think that's probably more the situation. Like you probably did something more dumb in high school when there was cute girls watching you do it because you thought maybe that would be you could do something different than you've ever done before, but you're a little bit more cautious when there's nobody standing there watching you and you're just practicing. That's what you're doing. Yes, it's going out on social media, but you're not thinking about that in the moment. When you have 10,000 fans around you, you're thinking about that in the moment. You realize that.
Throw something else in there too. The idea is to if you're going to open up a game like this, like a spring game, is that you want the stadium relatively filled. And what you don't want is a 3/4 to 80% empty stadium. And let's be honest, right now, there isn't enough trust in the Wisconsin football program to want to go and watch these get there's not a player, there's not a quarterback that you have to see where you want to fill in and just kind of watch what's going on. I think there's a bit of a marketable issue here where it's like, we're actually hurting ourselves if we have an empty stadium for this game. Let's just keep it closed.
I would love to see the football program before we run through the top 25 in D3 baseball and then get to our last break before we hand out shovels, is that if you remember Barry Alvarez, his first couple of years, he took the show on the road on a day like today and played at Milwaukee Pulaski and some of the other high schools, in the state to try and build up support for a team that was in need of support. We always think, again, and you've referenced this, Dan, we think of Barry Alvarez at the end of his career where he was the patriarch and built that program up, but he walked into a program that really was in trouble, and I thought did something smart by taking it on the road and going to places to build that community again and get the name in the forefront. I don't think it would necessarily hurt if you were playing at, I don't know, Arrowhead, or you go to, or any of the D3 schools. So suddenly you're at La Crosse or Platteville, or you're up at St. Norbert, whatever the case may be, playing there and running your practice. Get it? It's cost. And in the day where we're trying to not lose other sports, that could get quite expensive, but I think it would help build the relationship within the state. As far as Division III baseball goes, UW Whitewater right now sits at number 4, 25-3 on the season. So continued success to them as they'll start making their way towards the WIAC conference tournament and then onto the national tournament. And one of these days we'll be able to get Coach on, hopefully, once they get themselves caught back up with all these rainouts and everything else that's going on. All right, let's get to our last break. On the other side, we hand out shovels. But as we make our way to break, one of my favorite clips from one of my favorite movies, which is Fletch. It's College Sports Weekly, live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios. We are powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook.
Drop your shorts and bend over, Mr. Babar.
We don't want to do that. So, my kidneys feel a lot better in this position. Maybe it's just that I'm not doing any calisthenics. If I did some sit-ups in the morning or bent over like this, I'd probably feel 100% better. Moon River. Whew. Thank you, Doc. You ever serve time?
Breathe easy.
Breathe easy.
to shovel the funk. I want to shovel the funk. I want to shovel the funk. I feel like shovel the funk. I got to shovel the funk. You want to shovel the funk? Do you want to shovel the funk? Then go ahead. Go.
All right, one last time. It's College Sports Weekly, live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios. We are powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook. Guys, we're up against the clock. Let's hand out some shovels. Charlie, you're up.
My first shovel is going to Luke Fickell and Jack Sorgi, bringing in former Badger quarterback Jim Sorgi's son, 4-star recruit. The recruiting class has just been awesome for Badgers football so far, especially in that freshman side of things. Luke Fickell, you get a shovel, man.
I hope he develops. Can we just bring somebody in and have them stick around for a hot
That'd
minute?
be nice.
That would be. Daniel, go.
Completely unrelated. Jackson softball legend Brad Guteneck, you just celebrated, I think, your 29th birthday today, but you did yeoman's work in helping us find comedy, so thank you for that. Happy birthday, cousin.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, it's all of the D3 guys that are still hanging around hoping the phone will ring. You know, some of them are going to find themselves picked up as a free agent on a practice squad. I still believe Blaha is going to be one of them out of UW River Falls. So I'm interested to see how the rest of the NFL draft works. And a shovel to Charlie and Steve yesterday for doing the draft show.
Yeah, well
great
done.
job. Absolutely great job. And Steve, nice job in killing the tree that's on the side table. All right, for us, we got to get out of here. My thanks to these two guys who join me each and every week. This has been College Sports Weekly. We are always live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios. We are powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook, and we're back in 6 and 22.